This is data visualization, data 205N. This is lecture number 1 in week number 6. And this is really about how to influence people. There's an old Dale Carnegie book, I believe it was. Dale Carnegie was a guy that basically invented charm schools. I don't know if he invented it, but he was a big proponent of it. And he wrote a book called How to Make Friends and How to Win Friends and Influence People. Well, I'm not sure if we're going to try to win friends, but we are going to try to influence people. That the truth is that's what we're trying to do. No beating around the bush, and we're doing it because we want to make companies better. We want to help them get better at what they do, and we're going to do that by helping them to change their behaviors, and we're going to do that through storytelling. I know it sounds like a long ways to go from one to the other, but I'll show you. I'll explain the method to my thinking here. Let's start with a makeover. On the left is a clustered column chart. This sort of works. So this is youth total primaries participation 2008 to 2016. And so we got, excuse me, dodged bars or side-by-side bars. We turn them horizontally because we got state names on the horizontal on the axis indicators. And so that's harder to read if it's vertical. So we turn them horizontal. And we posted the numbers on each of the bars, and we used a reasonable shade of complementary colors or adjacent colors. Um, we could still improve on that. And this is what where you have two data points like this, or two or three, maybe even four at the most, but where you have just a couple or three data points, a slope chart can work really well because a slope chart really talks about how things change from one to another. And so on the right is a slope chart. Usually a slope chart, you draw the points, the individual points, not just the line, but you draw the point just to emphasize what you're up to. And then you put, so this is the same data. We've changed the title because we really want to highlight what's going on. So 4 or 5 closely contested states saw increased youth participation in primary elections in 2016, and only Ohio didn't. And so we emphasize the uh, 5 closely watched states, and we didn't emphasize Ohio because it actually went down. But so these slope charts work really well. I mean, you can really clearly see what happened in Illinois and Florida and North Carolina, and you can compare it to each other, the kind of the before and after compared to each other. So this is a really effective way of showing data particularly when you have 2 points, points in time, that sort of thing. So the slope chart communicates more effectively, and the title is just, it's driving home the point. A lot of times, chart designers uh, chart designers go down the route of saying what their chart is. That's a mistake. That's a missed opportunity. What you want to do is say what your chart is trying to tell the reader. This is what I want to persuade you of as a reader. And in this case, 4 to 5 closely contested states saw increased youth participation. That's the important takeaway. So make that a headline. Make that, a big part of your chart visualization. So what's a story? We're going to talk about storytelling. What's a story? Let's take it apart. It's a set of observations, facts, or events. Could be true, could be invented, that are presented in a specific order such that they create an emotional reaction in the audience. Now, storytelling is a long cultural tradition for human beings. And so we have a recognized methodology that stories work. They work because we expect them to be that way, and they work because they evoke certain things in us that probably go back beyond even storytelling. So we create an emotional reaction through a buildup of tension at the beginning of the story. Then we have some kind of resolution towards the end of the story. That's kind of the nuts and bolts of the story. That's the core of a story. If a story doesn't have any buildup of tension, then it's probably not a very interesting story, and not many people are going to listen to it. And we refer to the flow from tension to resolution as the story arc. Every good story has a clear, identifiable arc. This is based on some really pretty interesting work that has been done. I don't know how much research Daniel Kahneman did. He wrote the book though, and what he talks about is two cognitive subsystems in our decision making. Um, System one is fast. It's non-conscious. We do it without realizing it. This is about pre-attentive, right? We talked about pre-attentive before. So we think of your brain as taking sensory inputs, and system one reacts fast to those. It's not, we don't even do it consciously. And we do it automatically, and it's based on previous experiments. Think of that as the autopilot in our brain. And when it passes, whenever the thought or the concept or whatever it is passes system one, it's passed to system two for further processing. And system two is slow, it's conscious, it's controlled, and it's based on consequences. And so this is really the big thing is based on experiences versus based on consequences. So the way we react on autopilot, if you will, is based on our previous experiences. The way we react when we do further processing is based on the consequences of what we see as those actions. If you're interested in pursuing this further, this Thinking Fast and Slow is a fun read through that oops through that subject. Now, I'm going to put up three lines. I want you to look at them, and I want you to very quickly answer the question. I don't want you to think about it. I want you to just answer the question very quickly. Bat and a ball costs $1.10. A ball costs a dollar more than a I'm sorry, a bat costs a dollar more than a ball. How much does a ball cost? Now, if you paused and you pondered and you thought about it, you were using system two, and you would have gotten to the correct answer. If you did as I asked and you just did it quick, you use primarily system one to answer the question. And system one very quickly said, well, a dollar 10 less a dollar, that means a ball must be 10 cents, which would be wrong, right? Because then uh, 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 a ball has to cost 5 cents because a bat and a ball have to cost uh, uh, it would have to cost because a bat has to cost how much does a ball cost? A ball costs 5 cents because a bat costs $1.05, and that way it's a dollar more. If a ball costs 10 cents, then a bat would have to be um, a dollar, and it wouldn't work. So that's just an example of putting your brain through the paces of fast and slow thinking. These are fun, I think. These are six-word stories. So our brain really wants to create a narrative. We always want to do that. Whatever we see, we want to create a narrative. We could do it on the scantest bit of information. So here's one: for sale, baby shoes never worn. Now, if you are, any kind of thinking human being, you have spun up a big narrative around that. Could mean all kinds of things. I won't even go where that goes, but uh, and it just took 6 words. 6 words, and you spun up a big narrative about how that was happening. Here's the second one. One bedroom, two voices, I knock. Okay, whether you realize it or not, you spun a big narrative up around. You put a story together to go with that because that's how our brain works. That's what we like to hear. Paramedics finished her text. Quote, I love you. So these really, you know, evoke a lot of emotion. They really get us. I mean, they get through to our conscious and our subconscious really quickly. Excuse me. This is the same author. The measure of success of System One is the coherence of the story it manages to create. So System one is successful if it creates a coherent story. The amount and quality of data on which a story is based are largely irrelevant. As you can see from these six word stories, they're largely irrelevant. Uh, how much the quantity, the amount, and the quality, largely irrelevant. Doesn't really matter. When information is scarce, which is common, System one acts as a machine for jumping to conclusions. Now just think about that for a minute. When you don't have a lot of information, which is very often, system one is a machine for jumping to conclusions. That's what you did, right? When you saw for sale baby shoes never worn, you jumped to a whole series of conclusions, right or wrong. You did it. You couldn't help but do it. That's what's so interesting about this system one versus system two. Now, in the 1944, there were these two researchers, Hyder and Simmel, that were they weren't talking about system one, system two, but they were talking about how the brain wants to put everything into a tidy, plausible narrative. And these diagrams, what they had, they had animations where these figures moved around, the big triangle, the small triangle, and the circle, and they just randomly moved around. And they asked subjects to watch these, and then they asked them to tell the researchers what they saw. And invariably, what the people related was some kind of plausible narrative, some kind of story, some kind of even a conflict that arose and then resolved itself. So it was very interesting. So these were just inanimate objects moving around on a screen, yet the subjects in this the research subjects in this experiment built them into tidy, plausible narratives. So we really want to do that, and we want to do that to the exclusion of facts. And we react much differently to facts than we do to stories. This is true of everybody. This is not, this is not right wing or left wing or anything like that. This is true of every human being. When we see facts that we don't like, we scrutinize them really closely. If we hear or see conflicting facts that conflict with what the story narrative that we've created or with what our beliefs are, we treat that like a physical threat. In fact, we have a lot of the same motions as a physical threat, conflicting facts to what our belief system is. We'll bend or we'll break facts to support our existing biases. Now, everybody has biases. You can claim you're not, but everybody has biases. And so we will actually take facts in front of us and we'll bend them or break them just to support whatever we already have, preconceived. This is very interesting. Corrected facts can potentially strengthen our misinformed positions. So they did a study where they took some common belief that was factually wrong. I mean, just factually wrong. It was I don't know what it was. It was, there's enough of them now these days, right? They took some common belief that was factually wrong. They took, sorry, yeah, they took some common belief that was factually wrong. They found a group of research subjects who believed it, even though it was wrong. They believed it, and they went to them with a series of facts. They presented to them a series of facts that proved that that was wrong. And what happened in a lot of cases was it actually strengthened the misinformed position. So rather than, saying, "Oh, I was wrong," you know, I'm glad I was corrected, they said they actually dug in their heels even deeper on misinformed positions. So it's harder to reject facts when they're visualized. So that's really interesting. That's where visualization comes in. It's harder to reject facts that are visualized. So if we can put it into a picture, it's harder to reject it. Not impossible, but harder. Okay, so that's facts. On the other side, stories. Stories engage more of our brain that go way beyond processing language. And so stories are about full brain engagement. They form a unique connection between the storyteller and the listener. This has been proven out through a lot of psychological studies. There's this sort of unique connection. I'm not sure if they've explained it very well, that a listener gets as they're listening to a storyteller. They increase our attention and empathy, so it's much easier for us to listen to stories than it is to facts. They make us less skeptical and more open to change, and they enhance our comprehension. So stories are good, facts are bad. So you could say that that's not exactly true, but this is relative to how people, audiences, react to facts versus stories. What people are looking, what you're always looking for is pattern matching, as I mentioned earlier. And so you're looking for something in what you've received to match a pattern you already have. Now, if this runs counter to a pattern you've already had, you're going to do all these things. You're going to scrutinize it. You're going to fight it. You're going to bend or break it. You're going to do all these things that are counter to them being facts. Stories, I don't know what it is, they ease their way in or something like that. So stories are good if you're trying to convince somebody. So let's just back up a little. I've gone into a business. Maybe I'm the new hotshot analyst, and I've been hired by a business, and they say, "Well, Thornburg, go for it. We hired you because you were supposed to be super talented in um, data analysis, and we got this problem with, this area of our business. We'd really like you to look at it, study it, tell us what we're doing wrong, and fix it." And so you go study that for a month, 6 weeks, and you come back and you have this, really well thought out, deeply researched analysis. And in fact, what the analysis says is that they're doing something wrong. Maybe not in so many words, but some process that they're doing is wrong for some reason. Now, a lot of times what happens in businesses is they start doing a process because it seemed like a good idea at the time, and it probably was, but then the environment changed and they keep doing it because they haven't really thought hard about doing something different, and they just keep doing it. And then they bring in some analyst who looks at it and says, this is not giving us the results we want. So when you do that, particularly if this is a deep-seated process they've engaged in a lot, that's like going in and calling their baby ugly. This is something that's kind of ingrained in them about how they do things. And if you come in and you say, well, that's just wrong, you could go at it from a factual standpoint. You can say, that's wrong. Let me tell you why. And you list off, 10 facts why it's wrong. That's one way to approach that. The better way to approach it would be to use a story. Tell a story, and I'll talk specifically about what that means here in a minute. So, in order to do effective storytelling, we have to understand our audience. We've got to uh, uh, understand what they need in terms of insights from our data visualization. And you have to think high level and detailed. And then you have to get a sense of the level of their analytical comfort. I've talked quite a bit in this course about the sophistication of the audience. You really need to think hard about that because different graphical forms just aren't appropriate for different audiences. Well, let's take an example. We have Chan Life Insurance Group. We have two different audiences. We have so Chan Life is doing a process update. So they're going through a bunch of processes and they're improving them. And they've got, in order to get a quote out, they have to process the request for quote. They have to underwrite it. They have to verify it. They have to send the quote to the agent, and then then the total response time. And so they're working on process improvement that will improve the first three of those. Fourth one, it doesn't improve, but the first three, it improves. And so, but it's going to be disruptive, right? So they're going into the organization and they're asking people who have done things a certain way in the past to change. And they may be, pretty well wedded to that. Humans are really resistant to change, particularly when it means more work. And so more work can mean just in the short term because I have to learn more stuff, or it can be actually more work, but it's, leads to a better process. So there's two major audiences of employees that have different needs in understanding this new process technology. One is sales agents. These are kind of the receivers of this. And what they really need to know is about decreased time required to receive a response for an insurance quote. So they really just need a high level understanding of what's going on here. Underwriters who are kind of involved in all the process steps need a lot more details on how and why the new technology system reduces the time required. So they need a detailed understanding. Okay, so if I am presenting to the sales agents, I'm going to put a chart up like this. I've talked many times about presenting to sales agents. Sales agents are not stupid. They're highly intelligent, but they're not they as a general rule are not detailed. They're not detail oriented. That doesn't work for them. So what they, and particularly in this case, what they need is a high level understanding. They need monthly projections of how the process time is going to change once we put this new system in place. So it's pretty simple for sales agents. We say the average response time was around 600 minutes until we put the system in place, and then it drops pretty dramatically. By September, we expect to have it down to 200 minutes. It's good news all around. By the way, in order to change part of a dash line or part of a line into a dash line, these steps tell you how to do this. This is right out of the textbook. So the textbook tells you how to do that if you're in need of doing that. Now, so I have two groups that I'm trying to convince. So, probably what I'm trying to do is convince the company that we should embark on this process change because it's going to be disruptive and, all kinds of stuff like that. The other group I need to get to is the underwriters, and the underwriters are, you know, involved in all the inside the company business processes. And so here's the chart that I might use with them. So it's a new IT system projected decrease processing, underwriting, and verification times. And what I've got is uh, I've detailed each of the process steps by month. So each of the process steps from process request for quote, underwrite and generate quote, verify quote, and send a quote to agent. Uh, I've detailed each of those process steps with different colored bars here by month. And so what I'm saying is that, in July, it's going to start coming down and then it's going to drop dramatically by September. That's my projection for process request for quote, for underwriting, generating quote, and verifying quote. Delivered to sales agent is going to be exactly the same. Nothing's going to change there. So this shows the projected impact of the new information technology system on each of the 4 tasks required to complete the request for quote. So it's more detailed. And because this audience needs a more detailed look at this. Let's take another example here. And this is about analytical comfort levels, not necessarily information needs levels, but analytical comfort levels. So I've got some patient satisfaction survey results at General Hospital. Here's the data file if you want to go look at that. And General Hospital presents regular updates on patient satisfaction survey from to everybody, from from its surgical patients to its staff. General Hospital consists of 2 main audiences. There's a low or a high analytical comfort level. For the people who are low analytical comfort level, these might be staff physicians, these might be nurses, something like that. Somebody who hasn't had a lot of a huge amount of advanced education. Um, the sort of column chart gives a pretty simple overview of the main results of the patient satisfaction survey. So I've got the various departments, neurologic, general, vascular, so on and so forth, across the bottom, and each of the bars represents the average patient satisfaction. So from 0 to 5, so neurologic was the worst and orthopedic was the best. And so real simple chart tells a real simple story. I might put this as a Dodge bar where I showed, like last month, this month, or something like that. But it's pretty straightforward. It gives a simple overview of the main results of the satisfaction scores. It makes relative comparisons easier for the audience. We can see that neurologic, general, and vascular departments have low patient satisfaction scores, and ophthalmic, thoracic, and orthopedic have high satisfaction scores. So that works for a audience that has a low analytical comfort level. For an audience that just needs more detailed data, even if even if this chart would suffice, I mean, this is sort of all the any audience needs. Let's just say let's just for example say that this is really all the information that any audience needs. If the audience has a high analytical comfort level, they're gonna demand more detailed. And so you might pull out the box and whisker charts. So remember I talked about those. Those really weren't for the meek or the timid. So I use box and whisker charts here because they provide a lot more insights into the results of the patient satisfaction scores. And what I can see, of course, I can see which is low and which is high, but I can also see that they have very different distributions. That the satisfaction scores, little variability for for the ophthalmic surgical patients, very low variability. Ophthalmic is the brown. So these guys are happy and they're also, extremely good, give good ratings. Patient satisfaction scores from some of these others have very wide ranges. So we have uh, uh, a very wide range of satisfaction from the patients, which I guess you could say translates into a wide range of different service levels delivered for these other departments. So this would work much better for a audience that needed a lot more detail. Maybe this was the docs. Docs are highly educated, presumably. They've been to med school, they've seen these kind of charts before, and so they're used to and comfortable with getting, very detailed kind of visualizations. So the point of all that really is just you gotta figure out who your audience is. You got to think about your audience and think about the right type of visualization depending on the audience. So the visualization really depends on the needs and the analytical comfort level of the intended audience. So, excuse me. So if your audience has a low comfort level, but they need details, then you might just think about tables. You might not even think about visualizing it. You might just give them tables data. You might use clustered or stacked, columns, that sort of thing. Slope charts, maybe they don't need quite as much detail. You can go down a slope chart or a strip chart. If they only need high level insights, that's where they need a detail. If they only need high level insights, then a histogram or dot matrix or a pie chart or line chart might work fine for them. If they have a high analytical comfort, you're going to choose different visualizations. If they have detailed needs for high analytical comfort, I could imagine you could pull out a violin chart. It'd be rare, but you could. You might use cross tabulation tables or GIS systems or Bosco Whisker charts, those sort of things. Uh, if they only had high level needs, you could use a Sankey chart. Remember, this was a parallel set. This is the thing with the graphs on it, the width of the line, or bubble charts or tree maps. So um, I think I started out early in this course saying, your choice of graph type, there's a lot of different kinds of graphs you can choose, but the data is going to drive you to a certain set, and then your audience is going to drive you to the one right chart. It's usually just one, maybe one or two, but it's usually just one chart that just works really best for this situation. Now, one thing that can help a decision maker is to give different charts for a different decision. And this is a pretty interesting thing you can do really simple in Excel. I want to show you this. So let's say we have a high-level decision maker that's trying to decide between software vendors. And we've got three vendors, potential vendors, Silver Star, Illumination Software, and Yellow Hat Systems. And we've rated them on ease of use, maintenance, support, reliability, and cost. So we've done a deep dive evaluation of each of these vendors, and they have these different ratings on each of those. That's one way of looking at the data. Another way of looking at the data is saying, okay, that's each of the vendors. Instead, I want to put all of the vendors' measures together. So I want to put all of the ease of use measures together. I want to see Silver Star next to Illumination Software next to Yellow Hat. Same with maintenance support, same with reliability, and same with cost. There's not one of these that's right. And in fact, at the point in time that you're evaluating it, you might choose one over the other. So let me show you a pretty interesting thing that you can do, and you could even teach a decision maker how to do this. So here we are in Excel, and I've got this chart, and I've created this chart for them, right? And it's now this is arranged by vendor. Okay, in Excel, in that kind of chart, all I have to do is come over here and say select data, and you see the switch row column. So I'm just going to flip the vendor to the evaluation criteria. And when I do that, I get a same chart. Well, not the same chart, same data, but it's by the evaluation criteria rather than by vendor, and then by vendor. So it's a pretty interesting, simple thing you can do in Excel to make that happen. So you need to emphasize with the data, and you need your user to emphasize with the data. That's what you really need. And so empathy is about understanding and sharing the feelings of others. And by emphasizing with data, you can create data visualizations that really effectively impact decisions. There's two common challenges when you want to create empathy with the data. One is it's really hard to associate meaning in large numerical values. And the second is it's hard to consider individual cases when you look at aggregate statistics. I'm going to give you some examples of both of those. So if you have large numbers, you want to do something with those. You want to convert large numbers into something more familiar. So if you have a fact, a Powerball lottery payout of 357 million, you could convert that into so 357 million is an abstract number. As much as we throw away millions and billions, that's throw around millions and billions of dollars, it's really an abstract number. We really we don't have a good sense of what that is. However, if I instead said cast that as $171,000 per week for the next 40 years. That's more concrete. You know, I can imagine what $171,000 is, and boy, getting that every week for 40 years, that's a big number. I know 357 million is a big number, but it's way too abstract. 171,000 per week for 40 years is pretty concrete. If you want to convey exponential growth, you want to replace large numbers with sentences. So instead of saying this grew at 10 times the rate or twice the rate or something, which is most people, it's hard for them to calculate that. The last 2 years saw the creation of 90% of all the data in existence. That's actually a true statement. So we've converted this exponential growth into a sentence that hopefully people can relate to. uh, you want to avoid the use of scientific notation unless you're designing visualizations for a scientific community, maybe an engineering community, but a scientific community. Unless you're doing that, you really don't want to use these. And even then, you very often don't want to use these. So you want to use words like millions or billions rather than 10 to the sixth or 10 to the ninth. Scientists know, pre-attentively what those mean. Other people don't. And it's difficult to convey the magnitude of change in charts without context. Let me show you some examples of that. Okay, so this is all about emphasizing with the data. This is a simple line chart. It's the monthly employment rate in the United States from 48 to 2020. And what you see here, so it goes up and down, obviously, but what you see here is this huge spike when COVID arrived. So we had this gigantic spike when COVID arrived. So near the end of the line, you can see we had this COVID-19 pandemic, and it really affected unemployment. The unemployment rate has increased substantially, but it can be really difficult to interpret the magnitude of this change without additional context. So you might think about something like a dot matrix. So here's a dot matrix talking about the number of jobs lost in the United States during the COVID pandemic relative to the total labor force in the state of Ohio. Just sort of arbitrarily selected for the state of Ohio. So this blue is the labor force of the state of Ohio. This is the number of jobs lost during COVID. Gives you context. I don't know Ohio that well, but I can imagine it's kind of a mid-sized state and it probably got pretty healthy number of employees. And this puts it in perspective. Let me show you a different example of that. I think this one's really quite compelling. Okay, what is 1 in 292 million? I just talked about, we throw away millions, throw around millions and billions. What does 1 in 292 million really mean? I got to move this over a little bit because I got to do something here. Okay, so here we go. 1 in 2 is the odds of winning a coin toss. So if I flip a coin, I have 1 in 2 chance of winning that. 1 in 10 is the odds of being left-handed. I didn't know this, but only 1 in 10 people are left-handed. Got it? 1 in 27 is the odds of winning $4 if you buy one Powerball ticket. Now, this is a little dated. These dollar figures might have changed because I think the Powerball tickets went up. I don't know. I don't do that, but let's see. When was this? Saturday, 2017. So the dollar figures may have changed some, but I'll bet the odds stayed the same. So 1 in 27 winning $4 if you buy one Powerball ticket. Okay, 1 in 112. It's the odds of dying in a motor vehicle accident. I think, oh, that's in the United States. So 1 in 112. I can still visualize this. I can conceptualize this. A little less than 1%. 1 in 317. The odds of winning $7 if you buy one Powerball ticket. That little dot in that. Okay, now get ready. So we're making a big leap. We're going from 1 in 317 to 1 in 292 million. So what's the odds of winning the Powerball jackpot if you buy one ticket? Okay, here we go. So I start scrolling down and you see this keeps going ahead. So if you can see my scroll bar on the right, I'm pulling this down, going down. I keep going down, 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 down. Keep going down. The rarest of the rare. I keep going down, down, down. So this is all these tiny dots in all these screens that went by. And finally, in that tiniest dot, so there's one little tiny, tiny dot, is your odds of winning the Powerball if you buy one ticket. So you wouldn't normally use a visualization like this, but I thought this was really incredibly effective. So this is using a dot chart. So it's one dot in 292 million dots that demonstrate the chances. A lot of times it helps to add a picture. A lot of times it's distracting. A lot of times you get accused of junk art. A lot of times it helps to add a picture. You don't want to make your data into a picture. That usually doesn't work. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen a time when it did. But adding a picture really can help. So this is about it. Animal shelters, dogs who enter animal shelters in hundreds of thousands. And so we've got this chart on the left-hand side. Excuse me. And where they came from. And then we've got a picture. Now, this isn't just any picture. This is Shelter Dog Max, and this is a really important point. We want to personalize this. We want this to just make some arbitrary dog. This is personalized. This is the Shelter Dog Max. Max entered the animal shelter in Portland in April, and he's still available for adoption today. So this really helps the user to emphasize with this data. So consider adding um, something that focuses on the individual rather than just posting aggregated statistics. These are aggregated statistics. They don't work as well as this. You probably couldn't just post this. Well, you couldn't just post this. You need these two together. It's pretty simple to add a picture to an Excel chart. You just insert and you say pictures, and then you get it, and you can drag it around on Excel. Let's talk a little bit more about emphasizing with data and talk about clustering algorithms. So a lot of times in market segmentation analysis, you use a clustering algorithm to divide, for instance, the customer's customers into different groups. They're clusters. And you do it that way because they have similar characteristics, and then you treat them differently. So at banks, they very often do this to find out who the high value customers are, because maybe they give them, extra credit cards, or, better credit terms or something like that. So this bank, Third State Bank, did a clustering analysis, and they came up with at least 7 clusters. I don't know how many they came up with, but at least 7. And here's the characteristics of this cluster. The average age is 24. 67% went to college. 72% were unmarried. Uh, they had zero point 0.3 children. It's always difficult to have a third of a child. Anyway, you can see the statistics that this cluster had. Now, those are just raw numbers, right? They have very little, I have very little empathy with these numbers. I can read what they are, I can rationalize them, but I have very little empathy with them. So what the bank did was they instead said, okay, let's give cluster number 7 a personality, and they called it Sophia, and that's a fictional character persona meant to create empathy in the audience. And here it goes. Sophia is a young single female who lives in a downtown apartment. Sophia is well educated, follows the news closely, and likely to be politically active, and does not regularly attend sporting events. So that captured a lot more about cluster 7 than this did, my opinion. It's not as precise, but we're not looking for precision here. We're looking for how we're going to interact and act with this particular cluster. Okay, so choosing a correct chart is important, and that's why I ran you through that last week. I ran you through that sort of progression from a box chart to a, not sure what the final chart was, but it's really important to think about what kind of chart you use and how you tell your story. So this is student enrollment at open horizon locations. Looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them in Colorado: Durango, Gunnison, Montrose, Pagosa Springs, and Salida. And the company is interested in year-on-year comparison of student enrollments in each location. So they put up a bar chart, a Dodge bar chart. Previous year, current year. Here it is: Durango, Gunnison, Montrose, Pagosa. So you look at that and you say, okay, that tells me quite a bit. The problem is that there's an insight here that Durango went up quite a bit and Salida went down quite a bit. That's kind of lost in this. I mean, if you studied this, and now that I've told you this, you can see it obviously, but that's kind of lost in this visualization. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to go through a progression. So I'm going to first try a line chart, and that doesn't work very well. I mean, it doesn't. I think I'd stick with a bar chart if this was my only alternative. Okay, I might try instead this is essentially a slope chart without the axis labels and the dots. And so I like this slope chart quite a bit. And when I add the labels and I add the numbers and the dots, this works pretty well. This says very clearly what happened. Gunnison went down a little bit, Montrose stayed flat, Pagosa Springs stayed flat, Salida went way down, well, went down relative to what it was, and Durango went up relative to what it was. So uh, we kind of iterated through a series of charts and got to this one, and we said, aha, this one works really well. As we talked about in the week we talked about color. Color is a really powerful attribute in charting, and you can use color very effectively to tell your story. So the pre-attentive attribute of color helps people to just pick out something right away. So this is about the impact of the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis and how and its effect on housing prices in Florida. And so I could have put up this chart. And if you really wanted to know about Florida, you'd come down here and you'd find Florida and you'd memorize its color and then you'd go try to find it in this spaghetti of colors. That's not going to be effective. I want to emphasize Florida. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to change the title. I'm not going to just say quarterly house price index by state. I'm going to say Florida experienced extreme boom and bust during the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis. And then I'm going to show what happened in all the states with gray lines. And then I'm going to show what happened in Florida. It went way above, almost above everybody in 2008, and then it dropped off to the lowest quartile after the subprime crisis, and it has recovered, mostly recovered since then. Much more effective if that's what I'm trying to do. Um, okay, so another thing you can do is you can use a BAN, a big associated number. And so this is just making this number great big. We've done some of that in our Tableau dashboard. We're going to do more of that. So this is a simple but really effective way to use a pre-attentive attribute. Remember, size is one of the pre-attentive attributes. Well, here's a size that jumps out at you. 3,300,300. And so they didn't say 3 million, 3 million. They said 3 comma 300 comma 000. And that's the dogs entering animal shelters each year. And it's bigger than any other text on the screen because that one grabs you. So we use BAN to emphasize the approximate number of dogs entering shelters. When we're talking about stories, there's different people have thought hard and long about these. Aristotle developed this rhetorical triangle. So we were telling stories for a long time, and his triangle was that how a story should connect with an audience. And there's really three legs to it, if you will. Ethos is the ability to show credibility. Your story has to be believable. I mean, it could be purely fiction, and then it's just for entertainment. But if you're trying to persuade, it has to be believable. So you have to show credibility. Logos refers to logic or reasoning. And as we mentioned, uh, your story has to be logical, but people can reject it because it runs counter to their facts. And pathos, and that's really connecting with the audience emotion. This is probably one of the most important and uh, uh, effective ones, and mostly underused in business settings. Another approach is Freytag's pyramid. And so this outlines the common structure. So you have an introduction, which presents background information. You have rising action, so you have some tension rising through these actions. So you introduce some rising action. It reaches a peak where the audience is exposed to this major conflict. Then once that's happened, you have falling action, which basically anticipates how the story is going to end, and then you have a conclusion, sometimes called a denouement or a resolution. It presents the end of the story. So stories need to follow this format. You really can't vary from this. It's very much ingrained in what we know and understand. If you want to communicate well, you have to follow this structure. So how do you present? How do you use that? So what's this all about? This feels real touchy-feely. How do you use that in a business presentation? Okay, so Hawaiian Bell, you're in a group of the senior team of executives, and you want to talk about customer issues. And so you go in and you say, well, I did a detailed explanation of the adopted data of the data we had, and I cleaned it, and I did this, and I extracted these data, and I had to throw out these records, and then the way I did data analysis is that I generated the mean and the average and the first quartile or the 25th quartile, and then I aggregate all these findings together, and here's what I found. Here's the data I found. Okay, this is not an effective story. This is not even a story. This is just the facts. So you're going down the wrong path when you take that path. So here's a way to use Freytag's pyramid to tell it. So the introduction, You introduce the basics of the problem, why it's essential, and you do that by introducing a fictional protagonist. We'll call her Leanne, and she's facing an internet outage. The rising action described Leanne's struggle with customer service to have the internet outage fixed. The climax develops the conflict between Leanne and the company as the internet outage issue is diagnosed and resolved. The following action is providing recommendations on improving customer service levels in the company. So the climax, excuse me, is kind of done with Leanne at that point. We got her to this, maximum stress level. We managed to diagnose and resolve it. Now we're going to use the narrative to provide recommendations on improving customer service, and the conclusion outlines recommendations. So this is gonna get past system one. This is going to be a story that people can relate to, and even if you're the manager of the customer service department, you're going to relate better to that. This is going to be highly confrontational. This is going to be highly collaborative. There are various techniques for storyboarding, for telling stories, for constructing stories, and storyboarding is one of the common ones. And the reason you do this is because then you can write things on sticky notes and you can, excuse me, move them around and see how the story works if you do this first or you do this first. And so you can use sticky notes, you can use PowerPoint, you can use various things to do that. So this chapter, you should learn the characteristics of the audience and how they may affect the different types of data visualization and which ones are most effective depending on the characteristics of the audience. You should learn the importance of being able to emphasize with the data so that you can create effective visualizations. Use pre-attentive attributes. We've talked before about pre-attentive attributes, but you want to continue to use those because you want to highlight particular insights of the data. You want to drive the audience to a particular place. You want to you learn to build several new types of data visualizations like a dot matrix chart and a slope chart. You learn the importance of illustrating storytelling. I'm sorry, the importance of storytelling to provide suggestions and how to structure using concepts like rhetorical triangle or Freytag's pyramid, and creating storyboards using sticky notes or presentation software. And reluctantly, I'll do this. I'm going to switch to a visualization, and I'm reluctant because I was going to try not to show bad ones, but some of these are so bad I can't help it. So I'm going to prejudge. I'm going to prejudge this one. So let's see if I can make this smaller. So this is a resource dependency. Reliance on non-renewable natural resources can make a country vulnerable. Okay, so at least in the title, they didn't just say, what this is. They said, here's what we're driving at. Now, did they accomplish that? In my opinion, no. That's hard to see there. You might only be able to see part of this, but so here's what this has. This is a share of natural resources in total trade. And so Bangladesh is number one, lowest with 1%, and Brunei is the top in the 30 countries that are represented here, and it's with 85%. That's actually all they're showing. They're just showing this is really just a ranked chart. Now, once again, I think I had another diagram like this. So I like the use of the flags because we can find ourselves here. I can see the United States. I pre-attendedly found the United States just by scrolling around. Oh, there it is. We're 25%. Pretty much everything else about this chart I don't like. Why they put this in a circle is a complete and total mystery to me. It just made everything harder. I had to read text that's in a bunch of different directions. I couldn't compare one of these to over here. I mean, I could see that it's smaller, but I couldn't compare. The whole thing is just so ill-conceived. I'm startled that they would publish this and say that this was something good. In this visual capitalist is a It's a site that does a lot of this kind of stuff, but man, a lot. Anyway, okay, this is our final week in the session. Hard to believe it went by that fast. So a little bit of a change on the way you do assignments this week. On Thursday, not Friday, on Thursday, you need to post your dashboard. So this is a recording of you giving us a tour through your dashboard. You want to spend a little bit of time describing what your data is, and then describe the visualizations you put together in your dashboard. You post that on Thursday so that by Friday, end of day Friday, at least two of your uh, uh, peers can respond to your posting. So just like previous weeks, except the days are different, you do have you need to respond to two of those postings, and that's due Friday by the end of the day. In addition, on Friday, you have two sets of questions. So no specific assignment except what you should be working on this week is your dashboard. So that's the last of the lectures. Actually, that's not correct. There's one more lecture, but I will bid you goodbye. I hope you enjoyed this course as much as I did, and we'll see you again in the future. Bye now.